Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Like that picture, Mendy. Hi, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. Got a number of sponsorships for today and tomorrow. We'll start with those. Year of Learning, Dr. Paul Koningsberg, in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Koningsberg, Shimon Reuven ben Labish, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nissen Hara Nissen ben Fardosa. Paula and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend, Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malka Mann, in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, Cheryl Scher, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva, Marcia Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel ben Harav Shimon. A month of learning, sponsored by Haran and Mel Haller, in memory of her mother, Malka Rachel Bas Yehuda Leib. Adina and Michael Kirshner, in memory of their parents, Florence and Nathan Kirshner, and friend Harriet Friedman. Tova and Leo Zimmer, in memory of her mother, Henya Bas Rav Beryl, and her father, Aharon ben Yosef Mordechai. Perry and Jill Meltzer, in memory of his mother, Malka Bas Baruch, and sister, Golda Leah Bas David Halevi. Carol and Josh Sanborn, in memory of her father, Yoshua Shia ben Moshe Yehuda HaKohen. Stanley Presser, in memory of his mother, Leah Bas Yehuda, his mother-in-law, Golda Bas Avram, and his wife, Ruchel Mincha Bas Moshe. Week of Learning, sponsored by Judy Iger, in memory of her mother, Bela Bas Anshel Yitzchak. Also, Week of Learning by Sherry and Moshe Gross, in memory of her mother, Miriam Bas Meir. We have from the other day, from last Sunday, a day of learning, sponsored by Aviva and Vernon Sulzberger, in memory of her sister Chana Edelbas Moshe Pinchas. And for Shabbos, we've got the following: a day of learning sponsored by Aviva and Vernon Sulzberger in honor of the birth of a great-granddaughter. But we also have memorials for Shabbos, CAYA, in memory of our father's grandfather, Joe Wolf, Yosef Ben Chaim, Carol and Josh Sanborn, in memory of Rita Geller's brother, Rav Yankel Cohen, Avram and Yoni Stein, in memory of his father, Chaim Ben Avraham, Bob and Judy Thaler, in memory of his mother, Kresko Bas Mordechai Eliyahu. And the Shemas have an Aliyah, Krank Rafia Velti Yeshir Shema Taliyah, and L'chol B'nai Yisrael, a good Geben Shtiyar.
Amen.
Amen.
All right. If we look at today's Gemara, right? Samach Bet Amud Aleph, right? We're coming back to a machloket, that Rav Ashi is suggesting exists between Rav Chisda and Rava. Okay, that's where we're picking up really the top of the Amud. Okay, but Rav Ashi says what they're arguing about is the explanation of the pasuk. and the application of a pasuk. Okay. So what is that? V'nirtza lo lechaper alav. Okay, that one will offer the offering and be atoned on it. Excuse me. Okay, so who gets atoned on by this offering? I don't see Harvey this morning again. We'll have to check. Okay. So namely, alav on him. Okay. Velo al chavero, and not on one's neighbor. Rava savar chaveru dumia didei. Rav is of the opinion that his neighbor is like him. In other words, if I bring the korban, okay, someone else also may benefit in terms of kapara. Mahu davar kapara, the same way that he, the one bringing the korban, okay, merits atonement, I'm going to say. Af chavero davar kapara, so likewise, another colleague, another friend, also is eligible for atonement. La'afuke hai arel, to exclude one who is uncircumcised, the lav bar kaparahu, because he is not considered one eligible, I'm going to say, for atonement. Okay. Now, Rav Chisda Savar, hai arel, Ivan de bar chiyuvahu, and this is where we were finishing up yesterday.
Right.
Okay, that Rav Chisda was saying, since this uncircumcised person is, I'm going to say, capable of being atoned. Why is that the case? Right? Because he's of the opinion, okay, that bar chiyuvahu, that he's capable of taking on the responsibility, okay, either by conversion to Judaism or based on, I think, on Marvin's question yesterday, that maybe for some reason he was a Jew but had not been circumcised,
Right.
okay, and I gave the example of hemophilia, right? Okay, nevertheless, okay, he can rectify the situation. How? Says the Ibaye, since it's possible that if he needed to, mitaken nafshe.
You can have a person.
Okay, he can correct the situation. Okay, so that's where we left off yesterday. Umi itle l'Rav Chisda ho'il.
What about a hemophiliac? He can never correct.
That was the example I gave. Zev, that was the answer I gave to Marvin.
I know, but you said he could. Someone could correct it, but hemophilia cannot correct it.
That's true. Okay. True. Okay. So that being the case, right, we might say that answer doesn't apply. Okay, it can't. Rav Chisda could say would have to come up either with a different answer to that situation, or he could have to say, fine, and if that's the case, okay, he is in the category of a lav bar kapara, right? Or a lav bar chiyuva. Okay.
That means he's always bar kapara. He's always allowed bar kapara. It can never be.
Well, by somebody else, by someone else. If he perhaps brought the offering, he could be a bar kapara. Remember, Gentiles could bring offerings as well. So if a Gentile could bring an offering, kal v'chomer, a Jew, even though he's an arel, should still be able to bring a offering. Right?
All right.
So coming back then to our Gemara, umi idle l'Rav Chisda ho'il. And do we say then that Rav Chisda accepts the principle of ho'il? Vaha itmar, but wasn't it said about this the following? Ha'ofer miyom tov l'chol, one who bakes, right, from Yom Tov towards a weekday. Rav Chisda Amar Lokeh. Rav Chisda says the person is to receive Malkus. Rava Amar Eino Lokeh. Rava says the person does not get Malkus. Now the reasoning. Rava Amar Eino Lokeh. Rava says he doesn't get Malkus. Why? Amrin and Ho'il. Because we say since, namely, might be since it's possible that he's going to get guests, okay? Especially if he invited them. Ve'im mikla'e le orchim, chazi le. And if it occurs that he has guests coming, then it's suitable for him. It's fitting. Hashtanami, chazi le. Here too, therefore, we might say it's fitting, appropriate for him. V'lo lake, and he therefore does not receive malchus. Rav Chisda amar loke, but Rav Chisda says the person in the case of baking on Yom Tov for weekday, lo amrin and ho'il, we do not hold by the principle of ho'il. Now, says the Gemara, bishlema derava adarava lo kasha. Okay, that's acceptable when we say the statements of Rava, okay, between earlier and the example of the baking are not problematic. Why? Hacha mechusa ma'aseh. Okay, in one case here in regards to the Pesach offering, okay, there is really no deed having been accomplished. Hatam, but there in the case of baking, delo mechusam, right? Delo mechusam ma'aseh. Okay, there in the case of the baking, where we're saying that it was not missing a deed. In other words, an act was done. Ela de Rav Chisda. But in regards to Rav Chisda, ad Rav Chisda kasha. Therefore, there is a problem if we say that does Rav Chisda hold ho'il or not. Okay, he seems to hold it in the case of baking, but doesn't hold it in our case. Is that really acceptable? Amre. So we would say, Kilit le Rav Chisda ho'il. Okay, if we're going to say that Rav Chisda does not hold by the principle of ho'il, okay, under what circumstances? L'kula. It's in regards to giving a leniency. Okay, l'chumra itle. But in regards to a stringency, okay, he does hold ho'il. Okay.
Rabbi, when we're saying talking about cooking on Yontif for the chol, maybe he'll get guests. Guess when? On chol?
No, he still may have other guests arrive on Yontif.
So, but he's not cooking. He's cooking for Yontif, not on chol.
Well, he's cooking.
For the chol.
In other words, his intent may have been to cook on Yontif, to bake on Yontif for chol, okay? And if with the possibility that he might have guests still coming, later in the day on Yontif. Okay, so therefore he would be Yotzei. And at least not receive Malchus then. Now, Gemara picks up with a new theme. Amarle Mar Zutra Berei de Rav Meri le Rabina. Okay? So we have Mar Zutra, son of Rav Meri, bringing the following item to the attention of Rabina. Katani, okay, our Mishnah seems to be teaching, Ho'il v'orla poselet, since it's possible that somebody who is uncircumcised renders the Korban Pesach invalid, vituma poselet, and someone who is tameh also will render the Korban Pesach invalid. Matuma lo asaba miktzat tuma, kichol tuma. the same way that if only some of the, going to say, participants are tameh, it's not like if all are tameh, af orla. So likewise with regards to uncircumcised, lo asa miktsat orla kichol orla, that if some are uncircumcised, it's not similar to all of them being uncircumcised. Hai tuma hechidami, asks the Gemara. Then in regards to tuma, what is this comparable to? What kind of case do we have? Ilema betumat gavre. If we're talking about the tuma applying to people, umay lo asaba miktsat tuma kikol hatuma. So then what do we mean when we say that a minority of tuma is not like the majority being or all being tuma? De iika arba'a v'chamisha gavre tmein. Because if you have a situation where you have 4 or 5 people that are tamei, va'arba'a v'chamisha gavre tahorin, and 4 or 5 people that are tahor, lo pasle laho tmein letahori, then the tamei people do not invalidate the korban for the tahor people. Gabe orla nami. Regarding uncircumcised, it should also be the same thing. Ha lo pasle. Here it also should not invalidate. Ditnan, because our Mishnah taught limolin v'la arelin kasher, that when it's both circumcised and uncircumcised, the korban is valid. Sorry. So Gemara wants to ask now, my shna tuma tepshitale. So what is the difference? That in regards to tuma, it seemed simple for him to bring up this point. Umay shna orla demisfekale. And what was so different about uncircumcised that it was problematic, that it was difficult for him to raise this? Ela betumat basar. But maybe then we're dealing not with the people being tameh or tahor, but the meat. Umay, if that's the case, sorry, says the Gemara, umay lo asaba miktsat tuma kechol hatuma. Then what does it mean when our text said that they don't make part of the tuma like entirely tuma? De'ilu itmei chad me'avarim. Why? Because were it such that one of the limbs of the animal, hai de'it tmei, that this limb became tamei, sarfinamle, we burn it. Ve'idach, and the other limbs, achlinamle, we're able to eat it. So the Gemara now asks the following. Sorry. B'mai akimta betumat basar. So why did we need to establish our Mishnah as dealing with tamei meat? Ema seifa. I would say look at the end of our text, of our Mishnah. Danin davar she'eino noheg b'chol hazvachim, where it says that we make a reasonable comparison, lesson, learning, from that which is not practiced with regarding all the offerings. Midavar she'eino noheg b'chol hazvachim, from something else that's not customary for all the offerings. Va'al yochiach zman shenoheg bechol hazvachim. And we cannot bring proof from the example of time because that is customarily applied to all of the offerings. Therefore, umay tuma. So what kind of tuma must we be talking about? Inema tumat basar. If we were to say the tuma of the meat, amai eno noheg bechol hazvachim. Why is that not associated, customary with all the other offerings? Elapshita betumat gavre. But rather, it must obviously be that when we're talking about tuma, we're talking about persons being tamei.
Right.
So therefore, we ask the question again: Umay eno noheg b'chol hazvachim. What do we mean then when we say it's not applicable, right, to all of the offerings? The ilu b'chol hazvachim, because with all of the offerings, arel v'tamei mishalchim korbanoteihen. Because with all other offerings, someone who is uncircumcised or someone who is tamei may send their offerings. Ve'ilu b'Pesach, but in regards to Korban Pesach, arel v'tamei ein mishalchim pschehen, that somebody uncircumcised or tamei is not able to send their Korban Pesach. Okay? Now, Reisha betumat basar. It might seem then that the beginning of our Mishnah deals with meat being tomei, the sefer betumat gavre, and the end of our Mishnah as a question deals with tuma of people. Amarle en, yes, it's possible, he said. Shem tuma kapari. Okay, yes, in terms of the definition of tuma, I'm going to use that word, that's what they're arguing about. Ve'ibayatema. Sorry, if we want, I would ask as follows. Seifa nami betumat basar. Maybe the end of our Mishnah also could be explained as dealing with meat that is tamei. Umay eino noheg bechol hazvachim. So therefore, then we ask, what do we mean then when we say that it's not applicable with regards to the other offerings? The ilu bechol hazvachim bein shenitma chelev ubasar kayam, that in regards to all the other offerings, if it's such that it was the fat that became tamei, the meat is remaining. Bein shenitma basar v'chelev kayam, or if it's a situation that the meat became tamei and the fats are existing, zoreket hadam, one is able still to sprinkle the blood. Ve'ilu b'Pesach, going to say, but in regards to Pesach, Korban Pesach, nitma chelev ubasar kayam, were it to be the fat that became tamei and the meat is still existing as valid, zoreket hadam, then one could sprinkle the blood. Nitma basar v'chelev kayam, but were the blood to become tamei and the fats simply to be existent. Regarding the Korban Pesach, I'm filling in again. Eino zoreket hadam, one is not able to sprinkle the blood. B'mai okimta betumat basar. So therefore, why do we establish our Mishnah at the end as dealing with tamei meat? Ema seifa, I would say, look at the end. Danin davar shelo hutar miklalo, midavar shelo hutar miklalo. Again, that we seem to be reasoning and determining something that is accepted from its general status, from some other things that are exempted from their general status. Va'al tochiach tum'ah, and don't use the issue of tum'ah as proof, shaharei hutra miklala, because we see there is an exemption from the general rule. B'mai, in what way? Ilema, if I'm going to say, on the top of the next Amud, betumat basar, that with regarding the tameh status of the meat, heicha hutra, under what condition can we say that it's permitted? Okay. Elapshita betumat gavre, but rather it's got to be with regards to the tuma of people. Because we know, right, that if the korban is tameh and the people are tameh, it is still permitted to offer the offering. Okay? So the Gemara is going to say, answer that question. Vehecha hutra miklala, and where is it when it's permitted, exempted from its general condition? Bet bor, when it is a communal offering, when the entire community is tameh, it too can be offered. So the Gemara now continues and asks, Reisha betumat basar. That would seem to imply that the beginning of our Mishnah talks about the tuma of the meat, Seifa betumat gavre, and the end seems to be talking about tuma of people. And yes, is that possible? It says, Shem tuma kamaf kiparich. Again, they're arguing about the definition of what is the tameh.
Can I ask you a question, Rabbi Green?
Always. Go ahead, Zeb.
Before they said the limb was tameh and the rest of the meat was okay. Can a limb, if it's all attached, they're talking about a limb that's not cut off, right? It's all
Right.
one piece of meat. If one limb is tameh, doesn't it make the whole goof tameh?
That's a good question, Zeb. You know, when I was preparing, I began to think, was that the case? Didn't have a chance to follow it up, but the implication seems to be that you could cut off that limb, get rid of it, and the rest would be all right. Now, let's take an example, all right? I'm assuming that if you have, let's say, the whole leg of the animal, okay, the upper part of the leg, which is close to the body, that might apply that it would render the rest tameh. But if it were the lower part of the leg, okay, and you had, let's say, the thigh section between that and the rest of the body, maybe that would be different. Okay, I may have to look it up, look a little more detail on it. Good question.
But even the lower part is still attached to the body.
It's true. Okay. So the Gemara, however, doesn't seem to deal, at least at this point, with that possibility. That's why I said I'll look back into it. Okay. So it says, "Ve'ibayat ema, kula b'tumat basar." Maybe we're going to say that our Mishnah deals with the entire Mishnah, all with meat tumah. Vehecha hutra b'tumat, right? And where is it then permitted? B'tumat Pesach regarding the question of the Korban Pesach being Tameh. Why? Because it says in the following Mishnah, Ditnan Pesach haba betum'ah, ne'echal betum'ah, shelo ba mitchilato ela la'achila. That a Korban Pesach, even if it was brought in a status of Tameh, right, may be eaten in a Tuma because its whole purpose, okay, its main essence or rationale is for the purpose of eating. Okay, now, a challenge. Meitiv Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua says, citing a Braita, HaPesach she'avra shnato. A Korban Pesach, remember, is supposed to be a certain age, and it goes past its first year. V'shachto bizmano lishmo. But they nevertheless slaughtered that animal, okay, in its appropriate time for the appropriate purpose. V'chein hashochet acherim. And likewise, one who slaughters others, in other words, other offerings, okay, and I'm assuming here that they're referring to the same kind of animal, a lamb, right, which also could be brought for shlamim, remember. Okay, l'shem Pesach bizmano, okay, right, and it was slaughtered also for the sake of being a Korban Pesach and its time. Rabbi Eliezer posel, according to Rabbi Eliezer, it's invalid. Rabbi Yoshua machshir, and Rabbi Yoshua says it is acceptable. Tama, what is the reasoning? Bismano, because it was done, it would appear, in its appropriate time. Okay, which would imply, shelo bismano, if it was done not in its appropriate time, and therefore it would be like any other shlamim, kasher. It would still be a valid offering, but it would not be valid for Pesach. Va'amai, and why is that the case? Nema, let's say, ho'il ubizmano posel, since it's possible that it was done in its appropriate time and it's invalid. Shelo bismano, if it were done not in the appropriate time for the Korban Pesach, nami posel, maybe then it also should be considered invalid. Amar Rav Papa, says Rav Papa, shani hata. It's different in that situation. Da amar kra, why? Because the pasuk says, va'amartam zevach pesach hu. It says you shall, I'm going to use the word, declare it as the Passover offering. It, hu, bahaviato, as it is. In other words, for its true purpose. Lo, hu, l'shum acherim, and not it, other, in other words, for other purposes. Velo acherim lishmo, and not other things for its intended purpose of being the Korban Pesach. Bismano shahu pasul. Therefore, in its time, okay, at the appropriate time, it would be therefore invalid. L'shum acherim, okay, but it would have to be for other things, namely like shlamim. Acherim psulim l'shmo, and the other offerings would be invalid for its intended purpose of Korban Pesach. Shelo bismano, but when it's not done in that intended, I'll call it Pesach time, shehu kasher, then it would be valid offerings. L'shum acherim, okay, for the sake of these other things, acherim ksharim lishmo, that these other offerings therefore would be valid for their intended purpose. Okay, now we're going to pick up a little storyline here. Okay, now Rabbi Simlai is the main character. We've seen his name before. Okay, remember, also used to commute back and forth, was a recognized authority, but his field of expertise was seen to be more in Agadata rather than halacha. Okay. Rabbi Simlai, Ata lekame de Rabbi Yochanan. He came before Rabbi Yochanan. Amarle, and he said to him, Nitne li mar sefer yuchasin. Okay. Seems to be a digression, this story, initially, right? I want you to teach, he says to Rabbi Yochanan, to teach me the book of Yuchsin. The book of Yuchsin was a unique sefer that was, we might consider it a midrash kind of sefer on chronicles, on Divrei Hayamim, but it also included a lot of additional information regarding the practices of the Chachamim. Okay? Amarle. So Rabbi Yochanan responds to him and says, Mehechanat, where are you from? Amarle, he answers him, Milod. I come from Lod. Remember, Lod was a major center of learning. A number of important rabbis lived there. Okay. V'heichan mutbach. And where are you established now? He says. B'Naharda'ah, in Nahardea. Okay. Also, remember, important place of learning. Right? Amarle, he says to him, Rabbi Yochanan, Ein nedunin lo leludin v'lo lenaharda'im. We don't teach this Sefer Yuchasin to individuals who are from Lud or individuals from Nahardea. V'kol shekain, and how much more so, da'at milud udmutbach b'Nahardea, that you are come from Lud and you currently live in Nahardea. Okay, now what happens? Rabbi Simlai, Kafeye, he sort of forced Rabbi Yochanan. Va'artse, and finally Rabbi Yochanan sort of agreed. Right? Amarle, he said to him, Nitneye b'shlosha yarche. Rabbi Simlai says, teach it to me in 3 months. Shakal kala patach be. Rabbi Yochanan grabbed a clod of earth and threw it at him. Amarle, and he said to him, Uma bruria de betaihu de Rabbi Meir, barte de Rabbi Hanania ben Trajan. Sorry. Whereas Bruria, the wife of Rabbi Meir, the daughter of Rabbi Hanania ben Trajan, Tanya Tlat Meash Ma'atata Bioma, who learned 300 lessons, in other words, 300 halachas, okay, Biom a day, okay, Mishlosh Mea Rabuta, from 300 rabbis, Va'afilu hachi, and even then, Lo yatzta yedei chovata b'tlat shanin. She wasn't able to finish learning all of Sefer Yuchsin in 3 years. Okay? So that's the comparison. Va'at, and you, Rabbi Simlai, amart betlata yarche, you say you think you can learn it in 3 months,
Months?
right? What happened? Ki shakil va'azil. At that point, Rabbi Simlai began to get up and get ready to leave. However, before he left, Amarle, he said to Rabbi Yochanan, Rebbe, ma bein lishmo b'shelo lishmo? What's the difference, okay, in regards to when we say an offering is for its intended purpose or not its intended purpose? Le'ochlav v'shelo le'achlav, or for those who can eat it and those who cannot eat it? So here we see why this story of a digression somewhat was brought in, because it comes back to deal with the issue of our Mishnah. Amarle, Rabbi Yochanan then says to him, Ho'il v'tzurba mirabanan at, since I now see that you're a student of the rabbis. Okay, honey, could you close that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, right? Ta ve'emelach. Hold on, he says, and I will explain that to you. Lishmo v'shelo lishmo, when we're talking about for its intended purpose or non-intended purpose, psulo begufo. We're talking about an invalidation in the korban itself. Le'ochlav v'shelo le'ochlav. When we're talking about to those who can eat it or for those who cannot eat it, ein psulo begufo. There is no, we'll call it for the moment, internal, okay? There is no internal invalidation in the korban itself. That's a exterior reason that it becomes invalidated. Lishmo v'shelo lishmo, for its intended purpose or its non-intended purpose. Efshar levarer isuro. It may be impossible to clarify its prohibition. Le'ochlav v'shelo le'ochlav. Regarding those who can eat it or cannot eat it, efshar levarer isuro. There it's possible to clarify its prohibition. Lishmo v'shelo lishmo, for its intended purpose or not for its intended purpose. Yeshno ba'ar ba'ar vadot. It may depend on the 4 ritual acts associated with the offering. Le'ochlav v'shelo le'ochlav, for those who eat it or cannot eat it. Eino ba'ar ba'avodot. It may not have anything to do with the 4, let's call it ritual acts associated with the offering. Lishmo v'shelo lishmo, for its intended purpose or not intended purpose. Yeshno b'tzibur k'biyachid. That applies to whether it is a communal offering or a private offering. La'ochlav v'shelo la'ochlav. When it comes to those who can eat it or those who cannot eat it, eino b'tzibur k'biyachid. There is no comparison between communal offering and private offering. Now, Rav Ashi wants to respond. Okay. Rav Ashi Amar, psulo begufo, the fact that we say it's invalid in and of itself, ve'efshar levarer isuro, or I'm going to say or there, that it's impossible to clarify what its prohibition is. Chada miltahi. According to Rav Ashi, that's the same issue. That's the same reason. Dema ta'am amar psulo begufo, that what is the reasoning that we say that its invalidation is in and of itself, mishum de'efshar levarer isuro, because it's impossible, argues Rav Ashi, to clarify specifically what its prohibition is. Now, Amar Rami bar Rav Yuda, Amar Rav in the name of Rav, Miyom shenignaz Sefer Yuchsin, from the time that they put into Geniza, in other words, they put aside the book of Yuchsin, Tashash kochan shel chachamim, the strength of the sages was diminished, v'kaha me'or einehim, and the brightness of their eyes also dimmed. Okay? Amar Mar Zutra, says Mar Zutra. Okay? The following. Bein atzel le'etzev, ta'inu arba me'ag male dedrasha. Okay? What is he doing? Okay, Mar Zutra? He's actually citing a pasuk from Divrei Hayamim, from Chronicles. He says, one time we have the name Atzel cited, and then a number of verses later, we have that same name recited as well. Okay, what happens? In between that small space, Ta'inu arba me'a gamle dedrasha. We have lost 400 camels worth of explication, of interpretation of the Torah. Now, Gemara picks up and tells us a braita. Tanya, it was said, Acherim omrim, others say. And I'll just point out quickly that others sometimes refers to Rabbi Meir. Okay? Hikdim molin la'arelim. Okay? In a situation where we indicate that the circumcised come before the uncircumcised, kasher, then in that case, the Korban Pesach would be valid. Arelim lemulim. But in a situation where the intent and the implication was, according to Acherim, Rabbi Meir, that the uncircumcised was in mind before the circumcised, pasul, that would be invalid. So Gemara asks, "My shna molin la'arelim de kasher?" What is so different where we say that the circumcised, which he had intent first before the uncircumcised, is valid? Tekula orla ba'inin veleka. Why? Because we need the situation to be such that only when all are uncircumcised, that's what we need, and that isn't the case there. Arelim lemulin, but when we have uncircumcised compared to circumcised, asks the Gemara, Nami kula orla ba'inin veleka. Don't we also have a situation there as well when they're not all uncircumcised and we don't have it? Okay, we'll just go over a tiny bit. All right. Lema kasavre acherim. Let us say then that when we say it's like the example of the others, we said Rabbi Meir, right? Eina l'shchita ela basof. Ukedarava, right? And that's like the view of Rava, right? Okay, and Rav is going to tell us a dayan hi machloket, that it's still an argument. And that's where we're going to, almost going to stop. However, just to finish, hilkach, here therefore, okay, hikdim molim la'arelim. if his intent was the circumcised before uncircumcised, molin chayle arelim lo chayle. Okay, that because for the circumcised it seems chayle, it seems appropriate. For the uncircumcised, it's not. Hikdim arelim lemolin, if he intent was focused on the uncircumcised before the circumcised, arelim chayle molin lo chayle. Okay? And that's where we're going to stop. Okay. So wish everybody a good Shabbos. Okay. And we'll see, of course, afterwards that Rav is going to raise a question about that.